In group 2, and we were comprised of Chuck Helm, Marga, Stephanie, Bob, Dan, Duncan, Kathleen, and Amy, we were looking at spaces for engagement, social connection, and welcoming audiences. And we actually had a couple of comments before we got into our assignment of things that we felt like were not fully discussed. And first and foremost, that there should be a notion of cultural confidence for and about the Hop, that there is a presence here, that a new building isn't going to change the things that you have already done, and that there is a claim to your importance to the college and your importance to the advancement of the college and its mission. So we felt like that would be really important. And also the notion of K through 12. And this was particularly important to the group because as education is slowly eliminating the arts as we go along, there's not just a privilege but a responsibility that institutions, particularly of the Dartmouth's caliber, that you have a responsibility of providing an arts experience and a cultural participation. It isn't just coming to the theater, it is opening the doors and saying, this is here, here's access, but also that Dartmouth is a place for you to come. So indeed that there is a recruitment responsibility. All right, so let's see if I can go on here. So the first thing that we talked about, okay, here it is already, the obligation of K through 12 and being able to say, again, this is a place for you. And often a child's only introduction to the arts will be at the Hopkins Center. What really should be highlighted here is full animation, and I think we've heard it in the other areas as well, but the Hop should be active and animated on all levels at all times. There are many things here we can't tie to our aspirations what does or doesn't happen in the building. So a lot of the notions that things happen before people even come to the building. Let me see if it's in the next thing. Number 2, foreshadowing of experiences, processing and contextualizing of that experiences, working with people's layer of comfort. Now the whole notion of pre and post performances is something we know and we embrace, but the notion of being able to allow people to self-curate their interest into the Hop. And again, that really is greatly dependent upon digital, on mobile, and on a wide variety of things. We also want to look at the advancement of materials that happen beforehand, and that's, again, knowing that the performance doesn't begin at the stage. It happens at the first time you hear about it, when you are processing buying a ticket, when you are approaching the building. And we really believe the front of the building really should be used in terms of animation and in terms of visual. I have always loved the static entrance of what's playing at what time, but if you don't know what Pilobolus is, it doesn't make any difference to you. So those images should happen outside of the building. We also think it's very important to understand in terms of who is your constituent link, donors, faculty, students, etc. And we don't believe that there's been enough investigation of stakeholders. How to deal with accessing the buildings. They are linked and unlinked. Again, and I think it was talked about in group 2, but the navigation of this building, if you haven't been here, Amy had trouble finding us wandering around here, but that there's a notion that also these spaces are open doors. They are not corridors to take us from point A to point B, but they're places where activity happens and we flow in them, we flow out of them, and they swing both ways. So there isn't transportation corridors. Every space is an animated space. Laboratory for cross-disciplinary. This is very interesting because there's been a lot of discussion about cross-disciplinary and a lot of discussion about the great things that the Hop does. We actually had a radical suggestion, and it is also actualized a little later in what we've talked about, is that there must be a place here for the sciences and for the engineers. Not a Hop space, an academic science space. So it isn't welcome into our space, but this is your space. And so that way, that notion of cross-disciplinary happens because the space is here, not because you've invited people into the space, which also means releasing power. And those of us who are in this business are not in the business of releasing anything, let alone power. So that's sort of a scary thing. No space can be a sole purpose space. Every space must have its notion that there's a multiplicity of things that can happen in that space. There's not just a presentation space, it's not just a teaching space, but that those spaces are able to have a wide array of things that happen in them. And that's a really different sort of thing, and it goes back to, Michael isn't with us, but what Michael Gordon said about when you come here and you sit here, that the only thing that is going to happen is what's here is not the case. It's that you might come here and learn, you might come here and have a performance, you might come here and use this very space as a respite space. All the spaces must be visible and animated, energy. The environment of curiosity must be here. Again, it goes back to visible transparency. That's been said, so we want to go on to the second one. Oh, and that's me. Okay. One of the things we think that are very important you cannot do without: good acoustics, good seating, visuals about what is happening, bathrooms, and parking. And I know people are talking about the expansion of the lobby here. We actually looked at that expansion being above ground. So you still maintain some parking below ground. Parking is a real critical issue, and you really need to have some focus there. Access to the lounge areas, and this goes back to, we would really love to see the way students operate and work on a 24-hour clock. So we would love to see this space open and available, and trust me, I know what that means, but if a student wants to work, where's my Stephanie? From 1 to 3, that you are able to be in here from 1 to 3, and not just to do your work, but you're able to get something to eat. You're able to have a cup of coffee. You're able to get together, and I know people are going, well, okay, how are we going to do that? But it's one of the things to think about as our libraries are opening longer, if those kinds of things are occurring. What's very important is that there is a face of the institution. We have buildings, and we have signage, and we have media, but people should be here. And there should be well-educated docents to greet people, to move you along your way in the path. And it's not just about ambling through a building and wondering, is there anyone that I can connect with? So the human element is important. And obviously, Jeff, this means an increase in staff and or an increase in a connection to your volunteers in your community, your alums that have settled here in the area. Food, drink, alcohol, comfort, accessibility, bathrooms, orientation, content delivery, gathering spaces, patron spaces. I want to highlight in there. We think it's very important that you have patron spaces. Patrons are important. Not only are they important people, but it is a way of deepening and strengthening those ties, which will lead to a greater commitment, both of time and resources, to the facility. So we think that's a very important thing that isn't here. And also for patrons to get together and compare their spaces and talk. And least you think we're being elitist, we also think there are student patrons. And so there has to be access to that space as well. Again, educated docents and parking. A memory piece. One of the things when people come into the Hop, they should leave with something that says, I had this amazing experience. Because when they take it home, and it's not a program, it's a memory piece. So if they take it home and it's on the coffee table or on their desk, it reminds them consistently of the great experience they had at the Hop. So tonight at Palabolas, I would love to take that little plaque that said, Welcome President Kim, and be able to look at it and see the bodies. But it's something you take away with you. Okay, I get to do this, huh? Okay. Desired space for active participation. One of the things that's really important is it's about meeting the needs of the individuals who come here. Crying rooms, very important. Those of you with crying rooms, Chuck has one. If you've ever been in a Mormon temple, there are a lot of crying rooms so that you can continue to be engaged, but yet have your young person there. Talked about good acoustics, meeting the needs of our patrons. Language issues. One of the things is there's a consistency of the use of, like, there is only one language. And so the notion of the multiplicity of students that are on this campus and visitors that come to this campus and being able to say, yes, I feel warm, I feel greeted, that a use of language and how that happens. Super titles, translators, people to help us through the work and through the space, content delivery and customization of that. Not everybody wants everything. So I don't necessarily want a program guide, but what I might want to do is talk to someone at intermission about the work to allow the individuals that come to experience the Hop to customize the content and how they want those systems delivered. We loved D2U. at Dartmouth. We think it's a great thing, should be used more, and it's an experience where people every day, they get a message about what's happening here, what's happening on the campus through their internet system. We think it should be mobile. Mobile is definitely the future. Leveraging the artists to be a part of it more than just blogging. And one of the big discussions we got into is it wasn't just artists who are here and working, it's your faculty artists, your students artists, to be able to advance and to provide some of that content delivery, to be here for discussions, artists who are here working and maybe not just presenting work. Democratization of the space. I know in a lot of this you go, okay, I wonder how this is going to happen, but that's up to Jeff. But the democratization of the space, that, again, that this is a space for everyone. And so that the notion that there should be some comfort level to that as well. Green values, social, economic, environmental, sustainability, some of those things have already been discussed. Daylighting, we think, is really, really important. It goes back to the economy of being able to conserve energy, but it also goes back to just a sense that you are connected to the outside world and that you are not cocooned. And that, when we talk about space, we don't just talk about buildings, we talk about virtual space. So the understanding that the hop is a force and not necessarily a place, but a both and build in the capacity to evolve. Because all of these things that we are talking about are of the moment, our future thinking of the moment. Our future thinking of the moment next week could be very, very different, and next year definitely will be different. So to build in that capacity. Okay, got that down. Physical manifestations, we talked about transparency, but there also needs to be a place for intimacy to happen, so that in thinking about some of these spaces, and they don't have to be walled spaces, but they can be movable furniture. They can be areas that students, faculty, and community members can create to make their own sense of intimacy. Social flexibility. As we talk about in the theater space, that there's a notion where you might have a performance, and we were struck by Don's comment, Don Glasgow's comment, that you can meet an artist at the end of the space. We liked the slide that Thomas had shown with a bar in the back, so that people who choose, I want to gather around the bar, I want to meet the artist down here, but that there are social flexible spaces that meet the need of the patron. And then there has to be enough space to breathe. There has to be room, and we don't, again, we want to look at movable objects. Smart rooms are very important. We have a great design decision theater on the campus where you can stand in a room and it's like that Tom Cruise movie. You know, that movie where he like put on the gloves and moved those things. Okay, somebody else saw it besides me. But one of those things, to have a real smart room and not a room that says, okay, we have video, we have this. That's not a smart room. Really a room about the future. Orientation to the world goes back to visibility. And an ambassador space. Again, there are people, and it goes back to Wells docents, but there are ambassadors who continue to forward the vision of the hop and what's happening here in a verbal, present sort of way, and I can elaborate on that later. Ownership through participation. We think it's very important that your stakeholders feel like they own the building. I think that's well said, and we can fill in that later. Active agents for cross-cultural, disciplinary campus and community, that the hop is that active agent, but it's not the only agent. So again, the notion of collaboration is key. The hop can be the agent for doing that, but it also should be a partner. Is that what that is about? Leadership for envisioning the future of the arts. We think the hop has been on the cutting edge of doing that, should maintain that premise, and that should be a premise that your president talks about. When we think of leadership in the art, the hop is leading the way. And then again, that you are a standard bearer for the university's mission, which also says that you're at the forefront of the president's thought, not at the back end of the thought. And strengthening strategic linkages, that goes back to patrons and students and having those places, and that this is a point of pride for the community. And I remember many, many years ago, someone said to me, I really love the hop, and I'm really glad it's here. I never go, but I'm really glad, I'm really proud that it's here. We really want them to go and be able to do that. All right. Spaces, nature spaces for audience engagement, identifiable points of entry, the use of language, that you're setting a tone with the kind of language that you use, ceding ownership You can plant the seed, but you don't have to garden it. And again, it goes back to that use of space. Setting the architectural tone, again, that it's open, visible, and then notions of traditions and customs. And we've not really heard a lot of discussion about the cultural diversities that are here on this campus and in this community and how it's integrated into the HOP. And so we really feel like some serious thought needs to be given there, and it's not just programmatic, it's also physical. And then how does the space motivate people to communicate and share their experiences? There's got to be an opportunity for people to either share their experiences not only in gathering, but to leave written and recorded opportunities of their experience here. And that could be a video booth, that could be a board, but there's got to be a way for that they can leave their own legacy. And I think most important, that we're in it to learn. We're all in it to learn, and the answers don't always have to come from the HOP, but actually can come from its stakeholders, its participants, but that every experience is that opportunity. Animate the plaza. Okay, these are like real, these are things that we want to see change. Animate the plaza. There's all of that space that's out there. Something needs to be happening there that isn't just a walkway in. Decentralizing ticketing, moving not only where the ticketing is, but this is also a really important part. And Sandra, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm sorry Ben is at the hospital working on his ankle. But there's a need for the nonprofit side to have its artics that doesn't cost $50,000 or $70,000 a year, to take the kind of information that you get from ticketing that tells you who that person is, what they like to do, what kind of financial commitment they've made, how you can approach them, and be able to gather that information. And it's something that not all nonprofits have, and I'm not sure that you're currently doing this now, but we think this is something that the field could provide that would be of use for the HOP and for others as well, and we can elaborate on that. Again, utilizing digital media, translation, the top of the HOP into a reconfigurable space. Again, we agree, moving the fireplace. We would like to see the terrace, which is off the faculty lounge, enclosed in glass, so it can be used year-round. And it also becomes an extension of the top of the HOP and a space, again, that can be animated. People can flow back and forth. It might also help with your rental issues and then the reclamation of the top of the HOP. We want to be able to see a tradition established there, so there's a reason why people come there, why students gather there, and then to have the staircase encased in glass from the bottom of the lobby all the way up, that would eliminate some of that sound but not obfuscate the architecture. All right, circulation clarity has been talked about, sophisticated accessibility, connecting to the parking lot in the back of the building, expanding the food and drink options so that they have a local feel to them. Many of us are working with foods that come within a 100-mile radius of where you live, and that notion of not only green, but shortening the carbon footprint as it pertains to food and drink options. Adjacent social spaces, varying the curtain time, especially when there's so many things going on in the building at the same time, going back to parking. And loyalty from the institution also comes from legacy, so not to forget what's gone before. I would like to ask